Hello, everyone. It's me, Andrew. I'm here in my home in lovely Ligonier, Pennsylvania. It's a beautiful day today. It's been a busy, busy, busy day. I have a visitor here, Barnaby, sitting in my lap. I think he misses White Daddy. Anyways, so hopefully you all are having a good week. We've been super busy here. I had a couple different meetings today. Hopefully, you never know if the meetings that you have will be productive, if they'll turn into anything, or if they won't. So hopefully this turns into something. We also got some good news, but I'm not going to say anything until I get that okay to say anything. So I'm secretly screaming with joy in the inside parts, but I'm not allowed to say until they give me the go ahead. But some good news. So I'm super excited about that. Good news. Yeah, so we've been super busy with just getting everything lined up. Last night, Jen and William, they were at Star Cottage Studio and filmed the latest Saturday morning tutorial, which will debut this Saturday with if all things go well, knock on wood. What else? I started a new painting for the Patreon reward. So hopefully I'll be able to finish that soon. I like it so far, but knock on wood. Anita's watching from Johannesburg, South Africa. Hello. Hopefully, wow, that's awesome. Thank you for watching. Michelle's watching. Hey, Michelle. Yeah, if you're watching, say hello and say where you're tuning in from. Norma says, hi, Andrew. Not fair to tease the good news and then not tell us. Well, I'm one of those people where I get kind of nervous because sometimes I've said things and then I've gotten in trouble for saying things too early. So when the ink is dry and it's not have any chance of running, then I'll tell because I don't want to get in trouble. Because sometimes you tell and then stuff happens and then you're sad and then the crying time. So I don't want the crying time. All right. So, but there is some good news. Yeah, and then just general cat stuff today. Like Gilbert, he's more chill, but then somebody had an accident in the kitchen. And I don't know if it was Gilbert or Barnaby. And so I can't yell at them because I don't know which one did it. But yeah, so that and just taking care of the kittens and making sure that they're getting taken care of and catching up on email. I got the nicest message in my inbox from a young artist who has just graduated from college. And they were like, please, 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 can I do an apprenticeship with you? And I was like, that would be super cool, except um, you probably have more uh, ex- experience doing metal work than I do. And they were specifically wanting to take um, an apprenticeship with me for doing metal smithing. And I was like, I'm basically new, which I'm not really, but in a lot of ways I am. So with the beading and jewelry stringing, I've been doing for 20 years. With the metal smithing, I've been dabbling off and on throughout those 20 years, but I've not been serious about it until probably 2 years ago. What year is this? 2023. So 2021. That seems about right. So anyways, it's only been recent. So I was like, if you're like serious about learning from somebody for metal smithing, you may want to go. And then they were talking about moving and stuff. I was like, that's a big move for that. But if there's anybody local who's interested in that, and interested in getting into metalsmithing, I'll be happy to help with that, because I do desperately, desperately need extra help in the studio. So, one step at a time. All right, I see a bunch more folks have tuned in. I see Harry's watching. Hi, Harry. Anita says, did you get the new kittens? We did. We have 3 new kittens. They're having their dinner right now, so I'm not going to bother them. Tallulah, who's a little fluff ball. Gertie, who's a little sweet, shy thing, kind of. She plays like she's coy, and then she's like a little baby ninja, and holding off her sisters. And then there's Idabelle, and she's all black. Super cute. I've been not getting probably as much sleep as I should, because I keep looking in on them and playing with them. They're probably like, goodness gracious, go to bed so we can go to sleep. Here he comes again. Who's he going to snatch now? But they seem to like it. So Cheryl says, hello. Shh, keep it a secret, but we're excited for you. Yeah, I'm not going to spill the beans. People have tried to crack my nut and get me to divulge secrets, and I'm like, nope. I don't want to get in trouble. Let's see. Michelle says, I just got the result from my blood test. Not very good news with my diabetes. Oh, no. Well, our thoughts are with you. Hopefully it's something that you can work on and, get your numbers where they need to be. I don't know what kind of diabetes you have, but hopefully it's something that you can manage and get where it needs to be. Michelle says, my doctor really jumped up my long-acting and short-acting insulin. I don't know what that means, but hopefully you and your health provider are able to come up with a solution that will be, the best and most conducive way to lead the most optimal lifestyle possible. Lorraine's watching. Hi, Lorraine. So yeah, busy times in Ligonier. William is at his wood firing class. I don't know if this is the last class he has tonight, or if next week is the last class. I'm not sure. So I don't know if I'm gonna keep doing the Thursday. Well, I know I'm not gonna continue to do them forever. But so our time on Thursdays is probably going to be short. So hopefully you all have been enjoying this interlude. I don't know how long William's other class is going to run. I think it's one of those things where you pay as you go, so it might be forever, which is not too bad. But anyway, so he's at his class right now, and if you're in town, the night market is set up. We don't really stay open for that because we're on the second block, and we don't really get a ton of traffic from it. So a lot of times when people come to the night markets, they come for food, and we don't sell food. So we don't stay open, because then either William or I or somebody we hire has to sit there and then look at the ceiling. I mean, there's always stuff to be done, but so that's why we don't do it. But who knows? Maybe we will. Amanda says, I made hot dish. It's so weird, but good. Yeah, it's like a really extra weird kind of loaded baked potato, but in casserole form. I don't know how to describe it, so besides that, but I like it. When I had it, I was like, "What's this?" And they're like, "It's called hot dish." And I was like, "Is that like code word for something?" And they're like, "No, that's what it's actually called." And so it's like a tater tot on top casserole, and I do enjoy it. We use this meat substitute for it because we're vegetarians, and it's still pretty. It tastes the same to me from what I remember, and a little less greasy too. So that's also a perk, but probably higher in sodium. But anyways. Amanda says, I love potatoes, so it's great for me. Yeah, I was watching somebody on Instagram and they had done up these potatoes almost like scallops, and they look just like scallops. And I was like, I need to try that. And there is a fancy name for them, but I can't remember what it is. I'm not going to talk too much about food, even though I could talk about it all day, because that's one of my favorite topics. But if I start talking about it, then we're not going to stop talking about it. And we have other things that maybe we should do, or we can talk about food. I'm game. All right, so I'm gonna flip the camera around, and we can continue to talk. But I'm gonna do a recap of what we did yesterday, and then I'll show you something that I worked on last night. And yeah, so let me flip this around. Harry says it's often much like shepherd's pie around here. Yeah. What's the one? There's one, it's shepherd's pie, and then there's the one that sounds like the same thing, but instead of ground lamb, it's ground beef. Cottage pie? I don't know. I never forgot all that. But I do like a good vegetarian version of shepherd's pie if we can do it. But yeah. There's a bunch of things. Like, I don't know. I just think about food probably way too much. All right. So let me flip this around. Whoops. Oh, let me see. Oh, that wasn't it. They added a bunch of I did the new update on my phone, and so there's a bunch of new buttons on my StreamYard. And so yeah. Oh, and my stand is all weebledy wobbledy. So anyways, hopefully you all are having a great week so far. I had fun with y'all last night. Last night we worked on this. So I finished this up. This is, I showed Spiral Stitch. It doesn't really look like Spiral Stitch, but I like it. It's fun. It's kind of, it feels like a creature because it has a lot of movement to it. And I love how those crystals give it a little bit of bling and ties in the silver of this. Now, one thing I didn't mention yesterday that I probably should have is if you're going to use certain types of crystal, sometimes bicones in particular, and particularly S word bicones, sometimes those get really sharp edges and they can cut your thread. So if you do use those in a pattern like this, be sure to like cap them with another seed bead on either end, and that way there's less likely that there's friction between the thread and the bicone, and will be less likely that it will cut it. So just keep that in mind. I forgot to mention that because I did use crystal, but I use a rounded crystal, and the rounded one I don't have as much problem with those. But again, since they're cut, and those facets are super sharp, That's how that happened. So we worked on this, and I think it's fun. Lorraine says, I started a spiral bracelet. Love how it looks. Oh, good. So I showed how to do this. Off camera, I added the toggle bar, which is basically what I showed you how to add this, except instead of using this round, the loop part of the toggle, I showed how to use the bar. And I wove my ends in and trimmed everything. Now, another thing you can do if you want your ends to get really close, you can use a thread zapper. I don't really use the thread zapper because I never was taught to use the thread zapper. So it just kind of is one more thing to think about. And also, most of the time when I'm seed beading and I don't do it as much as I used to because I used to travel away a lot more, but I don't travel as much as I used to. So when I used to travel a lot for trade shows, I used to sit in the airport for hours and hours and hours and on the airplane for hours and wait for the connection and do all this stuff. And sometimes you'd get a cell service, sometimes you didn't, and so instead of like day drinking at the bar, I would go and do my CB projects. And so I didn't carry a thread zapper with me because at that point in time, you couldn't take those like on the plane. So I would pack, instead of like scissors or things like that, I would pack some a fresh pair of nail clippers and have that in my travel case, and then I could work almost anywhere. So that was a good kind of thing for me. Keep everything kind of portable and light and contained in a little Tupperware container, and then I could put it in my shoulder bag. I didn't even have to check it or anything like that. So that's kind of like, sometimes you do things because maybe you were taught a certain way, but I don't really use the thread zapper, but I think if you want to get really close in there, that could be an option of doing that as well. Um, Amanda says, I've heard some people use nail clippers to cut wire. I don't know about those people, but I would be hesitant to do that because nail clippers are not necessarily, depends where you get your nail clippers, but I don't know. I think that that's a quick way to destroy a pair of nail clippers. But again, it depends on the wire and if you're in a pinch, you have to do what you got to do sometimes. I remember there's this one competition that I was in, a live competition, and it was a beating challenge. And one of the curveballs that they put nothing that you could cut stuff with. So there was no nippers, cutters, scissors, anything like that. So you had to either tear stuff or figure something else out, and it was pretty intense. Um, it was fun, but you had to think out of the box. Um, so so I don't know. I wouldn't use those for that. Um, and one of the reasons why is there's different, and I've talked about this a little bit, but when on cutters, generally it's like the blades meet and they cut like this. So there's a very thin, fine edge that are meeting and they're cutting, and that's what cuts. So if you have anything that's too thick or too hard, if you go like this, that will conform around whatever you're cutting, and it'll leave a divot in your steel because it's very thin. And then if it ends up having too many divots, it won't cut anything. And I have not successfully met anybody who can um, sharpen those down. There used to be this old guy who he was like, he had a sign and you had to look for his sign in his yard, but he used to sharpen knives and you'd pay like $1 or something like that, and he would sharpen knives and clean up your pliers and do stuff like that. But I don't think he's alive anymore. So, but to get it those divots out, you have to grind it down and then reprofile it and hope that it meets up, and then meets up still. So it, I don't know. If you have cheapy deepy ones and you don't care about it, have at it. But if you're cutting wire, you're going to want to look for one that has a shearing motion. Especially if you're cutting steel wire or heavier gauge wire, because that will, it's a different motion, and I don't know. They last longer and they don't get destroyed instantly because it's a different motion. And so, anyways, so you're almost precisely breaking the metal, if you know what I mean. All right, so we made this yesterday. I wanted to show a sample. And William had inadvertently packed my sample in the van, the minivan. So I didn't have the sample. He's like, well, I can run it over. And I was like, you're in the middle of class, so no. So I made up a sample of what the spiral bracelet looks like without the daggers, and using size 11 seed beads. So this is size 11 seed beads, and size 8 seed beads for the core beads. So size 8, I got them Slytherin colors, y'all. I don't really, but anyway, so here is the spiral stitch, but we're using size 11 seed beads and size 8 seed beads. So it's the same exact thing that we did for this one, except the beads that I picked were different. And so depending on what you mix, it's the same exact stitch, and you get those two different looks. So it just depends on what you're doing and what the look that you're going for. But I think this is a really lovely kind of thing that you can, it's a good foundation stitch that you can build on top of. So I think that's useful. So then after I did this sample, and this took a little bit longer because the beads were smaller. So it took like about an hour and 20 minutes, maybe a little bit less. I was listening to my audiobook. And so I kind of got lost in it. One thing that I'm just going to tell, I don't know if y'all work for the publishing industry, but if you're going to sell a package, like if you're going to sell one of those books where there's 3 books in one kind of thing, because sometimes I'll buy like a collection. So instead of buying one book at a time, they offer all 3 books for 1 credit on Audible. And so one thing I would say is if you're going to do that, make a clear distinction in the break of when one book ends and one book starts. Even if it's like an indication on which chapter it is. Because I listened to the one audiobook that Cecilia and Sorcery, or the Enchanted Chocolate Pot book. And I listened that by itself, and then I got the kind of 3-for-1. And so I was in the 3-for-1, and I was trying to find where the second book started, and it took forever trying to pinpoint when the one book ended and the other one started. So I don't know if any of y'all have any sway out there, but if y'all do, put your powers to good work, because you have one of your customers out here playing hunt and seek and find. But anyway, so we did this spiral stitch last night. Lorraine says, how do you connect that one? I didn't add a clasp because I don't have any clasps here, but there's a couple different options that I could do. I could make an S clasp out of wire, and have a hammered one, and it could be like that. Or I could add a jump ring, add some chain, and a lobster claw, which I like. One of the other things that's kind of a good thing is that if you have your mechanical structures on if you connect them separately. So if you have like a lobster claw or whatever, and it's like a piece that you've worked on for hours and hours and hours, I would recommend attaching that to with a jump ring. And that may sound wild and crazy, and you're like, why are you going to do that? Why don't you just stitch it into the work? Well, if your lobster claw fails, then you have to take the whole thing apart. So, I've had to do that repair before. It's not fun. Some people do stuff with their beadwork that I don't know. They have their own way of doing stuff. I could not figure it out for the life of me. There's a repair that I had to do that I could not figure it out because they did some kind of it was not like our it like some of these things you can repeat it and like where to fill in and how to patch things and how to add stuff on. But sometimes people do things in a way that don't really make sense. It's very kind of like organic and they just do whatever, which is fine if they're going to do the repair, but for somebody else, it's like I don't know what they did. So like there was one repair I did that they put glue in probably every orifice on the universe, and that was a nightmare. It was a nightmare, and I can kind of see why they did it. It was one of those beaded ropes that was made of gemstones. And so I'm guessing that they put that glue in there so beads would stop falling out. But it made having to deal with that super, super challenging because then I had to go in and clean the holes of all thousand bajillions gemstone beads that they use, and it just took forever. And so, anyways, so that's how I would connect this if I decided to use this. Now I can also use this, add a little bit of chain, and have a minimalist necklace. So there's that. But I didn't have a clasp, so I didn't want to add one. Or I had a clasp, but it wasn't the right color. So I was like, I use this silver bead, so I'm gonna use a silver bead. And so Michelle was talking about doing beaded vessels. And so I started playing around with this idea, which is what I'm going to show you today is circular brick stitch. We're going to make this. But I started with this form and then I started making the panels, and that seemed to work, except the only thing that I had an issue with is that when I went to fold it up, the problem that I was having was that I didn't plan exactly how they were going to be stitched together. So they came together, but there was some wonky pieces down at the bottom that didn't want to like Velcro. You know how, or not Velcro, but like zipper into place. Like with regular peyote stitch, they kind of zipper together. And when you do brick stitch, you can sometimes like straight brick stitch, you get this kind of wavy end, and that wavy end can be used to lock into another wavy end, and you could just run a seam up through it and it becomes seamless. So I thought I could do that, and so I built these panels, and I only got about two of them done, or probably three. I got two of them done and one of them started. And what happened was I went up to kind of see if it would fit together and it didn't fit together. So I was like, I don't feel confident in that. So I did plan B, which was I had this idea that I could make. I took the tutorial that I showed you all the other day, and I was going to make a vessel like standing up like this. And what I realized is that um, it's too loose of a structure to hold itself up. So it will just collapse in on itself. And I mean, I can reinforce it. And once it's all connected up, it will become stronger. Like the idea was to kind of make this, but have it around that base. But you can see it's kind of wobbly on the small side. So that did not work out super well. I still like it. It looks like some kind of creature's skin. It won't go longer because I'm working this way, but it kind of has a cool feeling to it. I don't know about y'all, but it has a nice kind of weird alive feeling. So I this is basically useless, but but it was good to do it. But so I listened to a couple more chapters of that book, so it wasn't a complete loss. And it was good to find out. So I was gonna try to do it like sideways, but again, I think I made it too tall, or if I want to do this, I should do it the peyote stitch um first and then bead those on top. So do the structure. I don't know. I have to investigate more. Again, I don't really make vessels, so that's why I'm playing around with it to see how it goes. But it does feel kind of cool, like some kind of creature. But anyways, I'm going to show you how to do this because I think that this is a cool component. Um, I've seen a lot of people showing how to do regular brick stitch and brick stitch with fringe, but not a ton of people have shown how to do circular brick stitch. And I think that that can be fun. You can glue this down onto things, put this into a bezel if you make a really elaborate kind of like mandala pattern. There's a lot of things that you can do. I'm just going to show you with one color, but if you mix and match, make rings, concentric rings, that could be a really fun kind of rainbow project or whatever colors you pick. So that's up to you. All right, so let's do this. Harry said that would look cool attached to a stuffed animal as back fur. I know, or like I was like, maybe I'll do a whole entire thing, like a huge piece made of this. But the thing is that I don't have that many of these beads left because I've been using these a lot. So I have maybe a couple more inches left of this. But I thought maybe I could like maybe sew it onto something and then have like this creature feature bracelet. I don't know. Again, this is mostly just for fun and to see if I could do it. I thought it'd look really cool as the outside of a vessel. What do y'all think of that? That would have been cool, I think. Michelle says, yes, no one really shows how to do this. I think that I have to go into my library and look because I think there are people in my recollection that do this. A lot of times when you see seed beads in kind of like this kind of form, they are using an armature for strength. Um, I can do that, but um, you know, it just depends. Either so they'll make something out of like a wire form and then build on top of that wire form, or they're using this dissolvable quilting interface. So you work on this interface, and when you're working on the interface, you know, it's it it's solid, and then you do all your stitch work and you like bend it up and you contort it kind of in like origami. And then because it's kind of in a sheet form and it's all rigid, it holds its shape. And then you dip it in the water and that stuff dissolves out. But then since it's all held together already, it holds its shape. So there's a couple people who do it. I want to say Jean Wells out of the UK does that kind of stuff. And I want to say that I can't remember. Um, I know there was somebody who's making vessels out of seed beads, and it was pretty cool. But anyway, so like I said, I'm not necessarily a seed beater. So what I know is not, I don't spend all of my time just with seed beads. Some people, that's what they specialize in. And so they know the ins and outs of what things can do. All right. So I've got this fire lime. It's a bonded, thermally bonded thread. And I'm going to cut off a wingspan. I like a wingspan because it's comfortable length for me. It doesn't get super tangled up. Sometimes I do stuff and it's just, it also is just like, usually it's just the right amount of thread. So I don't constantly keep having to add thread. I'd rather weave one thing in as opposed to like a dozen things in. All right, I threaded my needle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up 2 beads. 1 and 2. I'm going to string this kind of down close to the end, but not all the way. And I'll give myself enough room with a 3 or 4 inch tail. And then so the thread is coming out of this bead here. And so I'm going to go back through and go up through the first bead. And this is kind of like the beginning of ladder stitch. So the goal is to have the beads side by side sitting next to each other like they're friends on the bus. If they on top of each other, they need to get off the bus because that's called getting up to no good. So you want them to sit side by side. And then what I do is, because I'm paranoid that everything's going to fall apart, is I just repeat that. And that strengthens it up. Now, if you're working with, I'm going to get all this stuff out the way because the threads are getting tangled. If you're working with a smaller bead, you may want to skip this initial step because, or skip the doubling up of that step, because if you have something that's super loosey, if you have super small beads that you're working with, and the holes can get filled up and you won't be able to get your needle through the holes. So it just depends. Like if you're working with like size 15s, don't probably do the, like reinforce it right off the back. But because I'm working with size 6s, I can do that and have plenty of room. So one thing that I'm doing right now is I'm just tying a small little knot in that thread bridge on the end. And that's going to act, not only is this going to make it more rigid, but it's going to act like a stop bead. And that's going to help when so it doesn't slide off later. All right, so I'm going to go back through and complete that loop there. And then I'm going to pick up a third bead. and I'm going to nestle that right next to that bead that the thread just came out of. So this is how you do this ladder stitch. Hey, Barbara. Barbara says, hey, everyone, working and lurking. Thought I had a cold the last couple days, but got the COVID. Oh, no. And I have really important pop-up this weekend. Bum, but feeling good enough to keep working. Well, I hope you get better. That sucks. All right. So I went through this third bead twice, and I haven't gone all the way back through. So it's coming out through here. It's ending in this position. All right. So you've got your 1, 2, 3, and it's coming out this way. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of pull that tension so it's not wavy gravy style. And then I'm going to fold this over like so. So it's kind of so that it's makes a little triangle. All right. And then, and sometimes it helps if I made that if you make your first loop too tight, then sometimes it doesn't want to fold nicely. But so you kind of have to work with that. All right. So you've got this coming out there, you folded this in, and then you're going to go and connect this last bead to the first bead and make a thread bridge. All right. And this is always kind of the most fiddly part of any project like this. Now, the key to having this be successful is that you keep your threads in the middle of the beads. And what I mean is, if this rolls up to here, it's no good anymore. So you have to make sure that you have that thread right there in the middle of the thing, because that's your thread bridge. And if your thread bridge is on the top, you're going to build up and you're not going to be able to build out. So I'm just going to repeat that, connecting the last bead to the first bead, and it's reinforcing that thread bridge. All right, I'm going to pull tightly, but not too tight, because if I pull too tight, it's gonna want to ride up, and that's no good. And if you have any other areas where there's only one thread, sometimes it's good to go back through and add, add that second thread so it's nice and sturdy. Because that's kind of the thing that's holding it all together, that little core in the middle there. All right, so once you have this little triumvirate of beads, your next thing is going to be to add the first, I guess it'd be the second row, circular, the first row after this. How about that? All right, whenever you add a row, you pick up 2 beads instead of 1. So when you're going to start this row, and how you do brick stitch is you find your thread bridge, you go under your thread bridge. Those beads are going to nestle sideways, and then you go back up through that bead that you just added. And you're using that thread bridge to connect your piece. And it's going to look like nothing right now because it's all kinds of wonkadoodle. But all right, so if to continue around, you're going to add one at a time. And this is kind of a loosey-goosey. You add what is comfortable to fill in. So it's not always, depending on the beads you're using, it could be you're adding 5 beads, it could be you're adding 6 beads, it just depends on the beads that you're adding. So just keep that in mind. You kind of have to play with it. So when you add this bead, you're going to go under the thread bridge and then back up through the bead. Now, as you're working, you're going to want to nestle your beads and making sure. What I do is I kind of hold it between my thumb and my forefinger and keep my work flat because if it gets off track, it can be kind of a pain to kind of correct later on. So I'm picking up a bead, I'm going under this thread bridge, and then I'm going to go back up through that one bead that I just added. And sometimes you have to nestle the beads so that they go where you want them to go, because they'll sometimes, like this one, it kind of wants to go off like this. But when I do this and add the next bead, I'm going to hold it in place and keep that tension on it, and then it's going to keep it nice and tight. All right, I'm going to go under the thread bridge and then up through that bead we just added. All right. And I'm keeping pretty good tension, not too hard, not too soft, just right, Goldilocks style. All right, I'm going to go under the thread bridge and then up through, and that looks like I'm going down, but I'm holding it upside down, so that's why. And then I'm going to add that like that. It doesn't look like much when I'm showing it because I'm holding this with my thumb and forefinger to keep it flat. All right. So I'm going to add maybe 2 more beads to this. The seed beads that I'm using are vintage Venetian seed beads. So they are Wonka Doodle. Some of them are big, some of them small. But I like them. So sometimes people say you can only do certain things with certain beads, like, oh, you can only do peyote with delicas, and that's not true at all. It does make it easier to do them with that, but you can use whatever kind of beads you want, and it'll work. All right. So when you complete that row, what you do is to make that, see how they're kind of going off. This is the first bead, and this is the last bead, and they're kind of going off like this. So what we have to do is we take our needle, we go down through the first bead that we added and up through the last bead that we added. That's what's called closing the circuit, so that everything has a thread bridge. Because if you don't add that thread bridge, when you get to go around the second time, you're going to be like, oh, where's that thread bridge? And then it's not there. It's not the end of the world, because you can go back through your beadwork and add stitches if you miss one, but it's just way easier. So what I like to do to keep that tension, so I don't always have to do a death grip on that, is that I go underneath one of these thread bridges. Oh, I pulled too hard, but that's all right. So I go underneath one of these thread bridges and then out through this loop and create an anchor knot, and that will keep the tension going. All right. So this is the foundation of the circular brick stitch. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up 2 beads because I'm starting a new row all the way around. And then I'm going to go underneath one of these thread bridges. And that, it kind of got wonka doodle. See how it's going all kind of off by itself? Well, I can pick those up, make sure that they're sitting kind of nice next to each other, and then go up through that last bead that I just added. And again, I want to make sure that these beads kind of conform nicely. So if they don't sit nicely, I can always maneuver them and wiggle them until they kind of sit nice. You don't want to wiggle it too much, because if it doesn't want to naturally fit, You can kind of persuade it a little bit, but if you try to like make it do something it doesn't want to do, it'll just pop up later on. So I'm picking up a bead, going underneath the thread bridge, and we just repeat this until we're happy. So this is only with 2 rows on top of this core. This one's not even all the way done, but that's how that shape is. And then the more you do it, like this is, let me see how many rows this is. So that 3, so then that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is with 6 rows on top of that 3 center. So the cool thing about this is that you can kind of conform these if you want, and you can kind of get them to make little bowls. So I think that's pretty neat. I made a skull out of polymer clay, and then I made a bunch of these circular brick stitch pieces and then glued them on, and that conformed really nicely to the skull. So I thought that was fun. All right. So that's all you have to do for that. Now, if you want, you can embellish this. If you have a piece of suede or faux suede or whatever, you can put a pin back on that, cut a little hole, put the pin back through that, and then glue this onto that. And then that's how you make a pin. If you know, you also have to keep in mind that you can see in between these beads. So if you want something to be shiny or reflective, you can put a backing on that, and then they get a little peek of something shiny through that. So that's up to you on how you do that. And you can also add edging on this. So one of the things that I'll oftentimes do is what's called a picot edge. And so you'll take 3 beads and then you just kind of add them and then go into the next one. And then you go around until you fill it in. So it adds a little kind of frilly edge, not too frilly, but a little bit of a decorative edge. Or if you wanted to continue with these dagger beads, you could definitely 100% sew these onto it and have that be a part of your design. And then it can kind of have like a flower shape, which could be cool. And then if you wanted to just have a circle like this, you can always, wherever the thread comes out, take some of those smaller seed beads and make a bail, and then you have a pendant, easy peasy. You can link these together and make like a bracelet by put sewing them together almost like a scale. That could be cool. You can mount this using cold connections. So if you do decide to use like a hammer and rivets for cold connections, make sure you wear your safety glasses because this is super sturdy. But if you start hammering it with a hammer, if you miss your rivet, it can smash it and then they can go everywhere. Now some people do that. There is an artist, Lisa Liu, or Liza Liu, I don't know how to pronounce her name, but she made these great big seed beaded pieces and had them very intricately woven, and then took a hammer to them in certain places and it like busted out some of the things, and so the stitches are coming apart and different things like that. And it's a really cool kind of conceptual looking thing, but it's definitely, that's not something you want to wear necessarily because broken glass, but it looks neat. So I don't know. And they're also really huge pieces, so it almost looks like almost like static on the old TVs or whatever. But so anyways, so that's how you do circular brick stitch. And it's a really wonderful foundation stitch. So if you want to do things on top of this, you have a lot of different options on how to do that. You can make a beaded bail. You could, if you didn't have these loops on either end, you could sew this on. You know, there's a lot of different things that you could do. I thought about making a huge, long beaded rope and then like coiling it, kind of like those African baskets. And then I was like, who am I kidding that I have this kind of time? But if I wanted to do that, that'd be like a real labor of love. But I probably won't do that. Anyways, so that's how you do circular brick stitch. I hope you have found these useful. William will be back tomorrow with something. I don't know what he's going to show tomorrow, but he'll be back tomorrow with something fun. And hopefully you all have been enjoying these. I've been having fun hanging out with y'all. And doing different more tutorials each week. Sometimes, you know, I only get to do one tutorial a week, but this has been kind of fun. And if there's anything that you're curious about and would like to see, you can always email us at info@allegorygallery.com. And I'm always happy to help if I can. You know, sometimes I can't, and sometimes I can. But if I can, I will definitely help. But if it's something that either I don't really own the idea of, or somebody else's their proprietary information, then I don't feel comfortable sharing that. But if it's something that's pretty basic or something that they put out in the world already, I don't really have as much problem showing that. So anyways, send us your suggestions at info@allegorygallery.com and we'll see if we can help you. And yeah, all right. Hopefully you have a great rest of your Thursday. Lots of healing vibes to our peeps out there who are going through stuff right now. You know, we care about y'all and hope that y'all have a nice, speedy recovery. And yes, have a great rest of your Thursday. All right, see ya.